It was back to school night, and I was sitting on a curb while my student sat handcuffed in the back of a police car. Kevin had gotten into a fight with a student from another school, and it had been severe enough to land that student in the hospital. As we spoke to each other through the window, I kept saying over and over again how difficult it was to see him in this situation. And he kept responding over and over again, "Kari, it's fine, I'm okay. This happens to everyone at some point." We were only a few feet away from each other, but the realities that shaped us were worlds apart. Being arrested doesn't happen to everyone at some point, but it does happen disproportionately to youth in foster care, particularly if they're Black or brown. While charges were not pressed against Kevin that night, just a few short months later, he got into another altercation, this time involving guns. He was arrested and is now in jail awaiting trial. Kevin was one of the first students at Rise High, a new educational model that would end up serving students from a wide variety of backgrounds, but that was built with the specific and unique needs of homeless and foster youth in mind. Kevin is gifted in math. He's a compelling communicator, and he made incredible academic progress in the 6 short months that he was with us. But he hadn't always done well in school. He'd bounced from group home to group home and school to school, had been separated from his mom and his siblings, and lost a lot of class time in the transitions. Despite all of these challenges, he blamed his poor academic record primarily on himself. I saw a different story. All kids, including homeless and foster youth, need to learn complex problem-solving skills. They need to understand the ideas of power and responsibility and how those concepts can build or crush entire civilizations, communities, and families. They need to know that there is an order of sorts to this world, and that numbers and formulas help us make sense of that order and of the relationship between living and non-living things. Kids have to be in school to learn this, but unfortunately, being just a student with school as the top priority is a privilege that many of our youth don't get. Homeless and foster youth don't have the same infrastructure or support systems as traditional students, which makes it difficult for them to position school as the primary focus in their lives or even to attend class regularly. There isn't always an adult who can drive them to an appointment. 3 meals a day aren't guaranteed, nor is access to a shower or a consistent roof over their head. Some of our kids meet with their attorneys and go to court at least once per month, and many have sole financial responsibility of themselves. Yet, they've been placed in the position over and over again where the adults around them make their life decisions for them, often without ever asking their opinion on the matter. In addition to the grown-up responsibilities they take on, many are carrying grief and trauma as a result of the multiple transitions or because they've been the target of physical or emotional abuse. They often lack the skills they need to cope with stress, and then, being emotionally overloaded or seeing little future for themselves, they can make reactionary, short-sighted decisions. All the while, classes, teachers, homework, and the pathway that education offers all of us retreats farther and farther into the background. When we created RISE, we spent over a year interviewing homeless and foster youth. What they shared with us reaffirmed our hypothesis that they needed a different education model. First, they said that school felt irrelevant to and dismissive of their current reality and future goals. Second, they said that school was disconnected from their social circles and their interests. And third, they said they were tired of their voices not being taken into account, and that they felt this happened primarily due to a lack of trusting relationships with the adults in charge. Ultimately, kids want a school that is relevant to their lives and responsive to their needs. And that's what Rise High strives to be. Being relevant and responsive means that our students don't have to check certain parts of their identity or experience at the door. All of who they are is welcome. Most homeless and foster youth have experienced trauma: abuse, neglect, rejection, loss of a parent or sibling. The list goes on. Aggressive acts like Keevan's are expressions of this grief and trauma of the loss that they've felt. When the adults at school don't receive adequate training to respond to these expressions, kids continue to be penalized for the pain they've experienced. This is why all staff at RISE receive training in trauma-informed care and restorative justice. This challenges us to always seek the why behind our students' behaviors and moves us toward an environment where they can begin to heal from the trauma they've experienced rather than continue to be punished because they haven't yet learned to cope with it appropriately. It also means that we take responsibility for the growth and learning of the whole child, not just their academics. Throughout this process, there is constant modeling of self-regulation and conflict resolution so that our kids can begin to see what healthy relationships look like. In order to respond to their holistic needs, we co-locate with service providers, and we have a dedicated employee on staff whose sole focus is student services. This ensures that kids maximize time spent learning instead of navigating a social service infrastructure that can feel really overwhelming and often takes them out of class. In order to be responsive to our students, we first have to know our students. And what we know is that 40% of homeless youth in Los Angeles identify as LGBT. When schools fail to support their identity development or demonstrate a lack of commitment to their physical or emotional safety, kids start to wonder if there's any part of them that can fit into the school or into the larger world. Because we know that if kids don't feel safe, they don't learn, we train our staff to create safe and brave spaces. We also know that 50% of foster youth are Black or Latino. Yet the majority of curriculum taught in schools still reflects white-dominant narratives that omit the history and achievement of people of color. At RISE, we strive to build a curriculum that is culturally relevant and that reflects the identities and experiences of our kids. Through project-based, real-world learning, our students begin to engage with issues and topics that are important to them. They redesign city blocks by graphing linear functions and studying the environmental impact of local businesses. They create meal plans for themselves and their families in response to local food providers, and they write letters to elected officials proposing policy changes around the food deserts in their neighborhood. Through meaningful work, they begin to enjoy learning and to see the tangible ways they can change their world. Unfortunately, Keevan's story is not unique. 70% of California inmates have spent at least 1 year in the foster system. 70%. Current estimates say that the number of homeless and foster youth and children in Los Angeles County ranges between 25,000 and 35,000. If the current trend holds, that is a lot of kids headed for prison. Unless we begin to shift our thinking around what homeless and foster youth support in schools looks like, our kids' giftedness and potential to impact society will remain locked behind bars instead of revolutionizing the world. All kids need and deserve to go to school, stay in school, and be in control of their own future. Homeless and foster youth need a little more support to be able to do this, and not just academic support, but mental and emotional support, wraparound support. The road is a little steeper and a little harder to travel, but at RISE, we believe all students, regardless of their circumstances, can learn, grow, and prosper if they're given the necessary support to do so. A relevant and responsive education will prepare our kids for college or for a job after high school and keep them out of prison. I'm proud to say that even though Keevan is in jail, he still attends his high school classes every day. His time at RISE and the support he received from the adults in his life allowed him to glimpse a brighter future for himself, and he remains as committed as ever to his education. He believes, like we do, that education has the power to change lives. Our homeless and foster youth know what it will take for them to thrive in school. Let's listen to them, be responsive to what they tell us, and support them towards changing their lives. Thank you.